Hello and welcome. I'm here visiting the workshop of Mark Hatcher here in Plainfield, Vermont, and we've been having a really great time just tapping away at woods and actually selecting the woods for the guitar that you just heard in that first clip. This is the first time for the series I've been doing, My Favorite Luthiers, where I actually had the privilege and the pleasure of sitting in their workshop and getting to talk to them one-on-one and maybe have them share their thoughts with you guys. So Mark, you've been building for about 20 years or so, roughly.
That's right, yeah, about 20 years now. Yeah.
So I know, because we met at Woodstock in 2018, I know quite a bit about your history, but for the listeners, people that are interested in your guitars, this is the first time they're hearing how beautiful they sound and how awesome they look. They'd probably want to know what were some big shifts and sort of defining moments in your career that got you to where you are today.
Well, I've always been a woodworker, and when I first moved out of my parents' house, I made all my own furniture because I couldn't afford it otherwise. But as time had gone on, when I was in my, early 40s, I found that I was renting a shop, a woodworking shop with my brother, and he was in there building or rebuilding vintage airplanes, and I was making ocean kayaks out of Western red cedar, and my son was in there laying up surfboards, and that was our family time. And I thought, this is what I want to do for my whole life. Mm-hmm. This is where I belong. And from there it was a matter of, well, but how do I make money? You don't make money making ocean kayaks with sticks. So I'd also always played guitar, and I figured, well, guitar is not that much different than a kayak. Every board has got a curve in it, and it's got a hole in the middle, so how hard could it be?
Yeah, yep.
So I got a Campiano book, and for 2 years I struggled through to make this Picasso-esque guitar, and but it took hold of me, and from there I had taken a workshop with Frank Finocchio out of Easton, Pennsylvania, who has previously been a engineer at Martin Guitars. Mm-hmm. And my second guitar at his workshop took me 10 days to build it. We still had to put finish on it, but it had strings and it played and it was straight and it worked. Mm-hmm. And from Frank, I don't want to build guitars in 10 days, but I would like to know how to set up a shop in order to do that.
The efficiency.
And, the efficiency. How do you set up a bandsaw? How do you, that, just the practical knowledge. It was a great 10 days right there. Mm-hmm. And so about 7 guitars built after that. I had taken the voicing classes with Urban Samaji out in Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And I look at getting knowledge from Frank and wisdom from Irvin, and really what I learned from him in the process of learning his voicing procedures was, well, how do you keep track of what you're doing? What's important to measure so that you have a way to benchmark your growth and to record, for future records, so that
Absolutely.
you are always in a position of growth and are measuring things that are making, that make an impact on what you're doing. And so that was, I think anybody who went to that class and came out successful, they were successful because they learned that. Because if you're not getting better, then you're getting worse, or you're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And plus, that's the excitement. You want to feel every day that there's new things to learn, and you have a way of measuring it besides, maybe your opinion that you wish that sounded that way. And you have a way of doing that.
It's very objective, right?
So that was what got me going. From there, it was really, I spent a long time destroying guitars. How thin can I make the top before it caves in? I got rid of 7 of them that way, but they had a real nice learning process of how to do French polish on each one of them.
Yeah, of course.
And so I threw out a lot of wood, but I was really on a mission to fast track that curve as best I could, and the best way to do it is to break it. And so I did, and now I know. I'm not afraid to shave that extra shave on a brace, because I have a feel for where I'm going and I know how to measure it and what the result will be.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where I got started, and from there it was, now how do I sell this? You know, it was to move forward.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, so that sounds like as ideal of an introduction to guitar making as you could get. You know, you get to work with somebody that has a really good understanding of efficiency, you know, working for Martin, and then you also work with somebody that has a really good understanding of how do you measure these micro things that ultimately will build a very responsive and satisfying, intimate guitar, because all your guitars are extremely intimate. The ones that I've played just feel like they're omnidirectional, and they just give you what you put in. You know, the bridge is very much an alive engine, and the guitars are very alive. So congrats on that.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So tell me about your current approach and your philosophy to guitar making at this point in your career.
Okay. I think in understanding any philosophy, you have to understand the philosopher first. You have to know who you are. And there was a book written by David Epstein called Range. And in his book, he talked about specialized fields of work and the different ways of approaching. In Range, the subtitle is Why Generalists Always Come Out Ahead. Basically, what his point was that in approaching your work, there are basically specialists that really know the nuts and bolts. You know, you're a good engineering background, you can go deep into the tunnel. And then there's more the generalist. And the way he referred to them was that the specialist was more of the hedgehog who would build that tunnel and dig down and down and down. But the generalist was the fox. And what the fox did would be to run from hole to hole and look in and then move on to the next hole. I'm a generalist. I've always been a generalist. I love to look into the holes, but not to the point where I lose sight of the other holes. And that's where the weakness of the generalist is to lose context of the big job that you're doing in creating a guitar, because there are so many complicated systems that can be measured independently, but they're all independent. And so, as soon as you get too far into one direction, it comes at a cost. And so this, for me, being a person who likes to chase shiny things, is just what I love, because I can get in, I could go in, I know what I'm supposed to measure, I have my goals, but I'm looking at the relationships, I'm looking at how it feels. I'm doing a qualitative movement rather than a quantitative one.
Gotcha.
And the qualitative is to go from big down, not little up, and it works for me very well. And it's been really kind of the whole push of the way I work is to let's attack the whole field. And so that's my philosophy, and that's my approach. And it doesn't go well with someone who's too far the other way. But let's compare guitars.
Very interesting. Yeah, I've never heard it explained like that. It's a really good perspective. Earlier you mentioned, am I a fox or a hedgehog? And I just had to laugh, and I was like, you're just going to have to talk about that in the interview, because that sounds like a whole different tunnel to dive down. So one thing about your guitars that I love, other than the feel and the tone, which are in my world the most important things, how it feels after 20 minutes of playing it, or how it enhances a song. Those are obviously the most important things to your average player. But the thing that I love and that stuck out to me a lot when we first met at Woodstock in 2018, specifically with those guitars you brought, the olive wood Penelope and the Cedar rosewood Josie model, it really stuck out to me. The hyper precision to a lot of the inlays that you use. And so in my mind, the first things that spoke to me when I was walking by the booth, I literally walked by your booth as I was leaving that Sunday, because I think when I'd walked by before, you weren't there or something, or maybe it was just Karen, and I was kind of like, I think I saw him earlier, but maybe I'll catch him later. It just didn't happen until I was literally walking out with my guitar. But anyway, the lines and the detail, the curves, and the very obvious appreciation for the woods, the materials themselves. It was so apparent to me. And when we were on the way from the airport a few days ago, you had mentioned something about when you're building a guitar by hand, you're actually building 3 guitars from a visual standpoint. And I think it'd be really cool if you could sort of remind me of, like, refresh that conversation for me and for the listeners.
Sure, yeah. Sure. I think everybody knows that a guitar, the body of a guitar, is pretty much the same dimension as the human. Ergo, there's just nothing that your eye is more sensitive to than that basic shape in that basic size. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking about it being in 3 different, it's very much like the areas of comfort that a human has is, that you have a certain distance that you talk to, people that you're meeting for the first time, and then there's a familiarity distance of about 4 feet, and then for babies and lovers, you've got 10 inches, and you have an emotional response and an emotional reaction to each of those ranges. And if you look at the guitar, there's the performance guitar, the guitar that's played for friends. Yeah. There's guitars played for lovers, and there is just the time when it's just you and the couch and you're playing the guitar. And you have a different connection in each of those. Yeah. And, your eyes are focused differently with each. And the guitar should be of a composition that has something geared and aimed at each of those. Absolutely. And they all need to work in harmony together so they flow to one to the next. So you've got to put some fine detail. There's got to be something waiting for you when you get there. Yeah. And it builds the bond.
It feels personal.
Right.
It's something that you alone appreciate, those micro purflings, or where that miter joint is, or what that little figure of wood that was used there. It's a connection between you and the guy that built it. Right. Only you two know about it, because only you two are the people that really dialed in on it. Yeah, well,
exactly. And so when you're building and when you're doing the lines, you're looking up close, you step away, and then you really step away, and you look at it at 3 different perspectives before it gets the okay, because you could look beautiful up close and look like barnacles from 4 feet away. So you really have to keep going back and forth. And with the photography, that really helps, because it shows up in photography when there is an intimate feel when you have the macro lens out, and there's a different feel when you're further away, and there's the upstage view of of the performer. But these are all different things. That's partly why the camera is so important to my work, because that is my reminder to take a picture up close, take a picture back away, go. Yeah. And in the process of focusing and just observing my own photos, first it breaks me away from being too honed in and getting too deep into that hedgehog hole, and enabling me to kind of look at the other perspectives and then say, okay, let's make this all work together.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's the fun when it does. Then you feel the transition from one to the next, and it becomes your friend.
It's nice. I think you might be the only luthier I've worked with who's also a photographer of this caliber, for sure. Mm. When you first told me that thing coming from the airport about 3 guitars, the first thing I thought of was that I not worked with, but I knew some people that had mentioned with fine art photography, people that frame their stuff and put it in exhibits in museums. They think really hard about the size of the frame that they're going to be using for specific portraits, like black and white portraits or colored portraits, doesn't matter. Because they're thinking really hard about, how close do I want this person to come in, who's walking down the hall or the exhibit, and how much do I want them to focus on those micro wrinkles on the eyes that really show you the intimate expressions of the subject. How much do I want them to focus on the highlights in the eyes, or lack thereof? So every perspective brings something different to the viewer. And I think that's like, when you said that, I was like, that's it. That explains why I love your photography so much too. And I can appreciate why, you have to use sometimes those really tight angles for the headstocks or the micro details. And then sometimes you take a step back and you just look at it like it's not your guitar. And you kind of look at it from, that's a brilliant guitar, I actually really want to look at that closer. So I think that's pretty cool. And you had also mentioned something funny, as said something about your camera is sort of the tool in your shop that keeps the other ones turning, I guess.
Yes, it's the most important tool in the shop because it keeps all the others busy.
Yeah,
because and certainly it helps. It begins the narrative of the story I'm going to tell. About the guitar, its history, where it comes from.
Yeah,
hopefully it will be in line with who we're building it for and is telling their story. And again, it's this. I think that the bottom line is this bond. You really want. I do. If a guitar that I'm going to sit and play, I want to feel bonded to it.
Yeah.
And if you think, oh, good, there's my guitar, you're going to play better.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just
That's
keeps
a real
you going.
thing. Yeah.
And there's so many different points of connection with the guitar, which is certainly why it's likely one of the most popular instruments there ever was. But it's about the size of a human. It's in the human range of singing. We're already programmed for it. And we've got our eyes are sharpest. An eighth of an inch on a guitar stands out like a billboard compared to an eighth of an inch off of your car.
Yeah.
And so when you have something that feels good, and hopefully I put Spanish cedar inside the guitar so it smells good.
Yeah.
And then the feel of it, whether you want to like the satin neck on it or feel the French polish or however it would be.
Those are things that'll make you reach for it.
Right. It's I guess they call it the haptic response. It's like what's it giving back to you for touching it? And probably the thing that stands out most with all of this is just that if you're working with natural materials, you're already starting with something that's got something to show you the closer you get. It doesn't fall apart. It doesn't just disappear because it was an illusion from 10 inches.
Yeah, you look closer and it gives you something more.
Right.
It's like even how like snowflakes under a microscope are just these natural wonders, the geometry that is created with them. It's the same thing with wood. You look at a wood and you'll see a highlight you never noticed before, or you'll see like a weird little face in the grain or something, little things like that.
And that also is a constant inspiration to me when I'm building, is to say, oh, look at that. Let's push that on the rosette to make that gold show on the sides or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes a dance. And I try to put a lot of myself into it, and I kind of figure that I'm not so far from the demographic of my customers. If I love it, they'll love it.
Yeah,
so what a great job I've got,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's it's a real win-win, I think, all the way around. But it certainly is a deep pleasure to work with natural products and to and try to evoke an emotional response before the first chord.
Yeah.
And
if you can do that, you've done a pretty significant part of the equation is already done in enjoying the instrument.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing I really love about your business model is that you have a really strong emphasis on working customer direct with just about every order, and so as a result, you sort of have this really organically grown business over the years because you post a lot of your really great photos and your build threads on Acoustic Guitar Forum, and as a result, people can kind of follow along from the sidelines. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I just finished talking about so much about this human connection with the guitar and what was important. It would be a little hypocritical for me to hide behind a dealer. I enjoy the process of speaking with the clients, whether it's a direct buy of a spec guitar or we're working through the particulars of someone's dream guitar that they have their own ideas to do custom work with. And I learn a lot. I learn a lot on the questions I get. The questions that I can't answer off the bat and have to think about for a while or try a couple torn up wood pieces to see if I could do or not are the ones that make me a big impetus for making me a better builder, and it kind of broadens my perspective. I am one of those that will say, yeah, sure, I can do it, and then later figure out how I'm going to do it, which is, I like that challenge. It's a little manic, but, there's a great amount of pleasure in accomplishing things that you hadn't thought of, and you always come out better for it. So really the big part of it is, there is the community of music lovers that play guitars, whether they're performers or they're doing for their own enjoyment, is not something I want to have anything between myself and them. And even with the, I do a lot with the acoustic guitar forum, and I'm pretty much giving you my diary of builds and my thinking, and it works both ways. So it's a living diary that talks back, and
and you have a lot of people ask you questions.
Right.
I mean, I've read a lot of really educational posts in your responses to other people about why you do certain things or what your idea behind that was. Of course, there's some mystery there too, I'm sure. But yeah, it's just entertaining to see it from the sidelines too,
Well, so. It helps, So that's more about what it is than anything. I don't want to hear secondhand that there was a concern or there was a compliment. I want to hear it myself, and so that's a big part. And plus, I haven't had to. So the business has been good since the day I put the shingle up, and then it continues to be strong. And so I'm really not going to change anything. It's a system that works, and I grow best with. Yeah.
So you had mentioned since moving into the new shop, you were thinking about starting a new series, Green Mountain series. It was called, I think, and sort of a hint to your new surroundings here in Vermont. And so I was just wondering, if you could tell us a little bit about that, because I'm also very curious, and if you could tell us a bit about what's on the horizons for Hatcher Guitars. What are some things that you're excited about going forward?
Okay. Well, with the Green Mountain series, I have 6 guitar models, and in this series there's a general upgrade, across the board with any of the models, whether they carry over or they're new. There's an upgraded guitar case that comes with a flight case now. The I have titanium hardware. I have I'm getting a lot of maybe this is the Green Mountain influences, that there's a lot of stonework showing up on these guitars. And I have a new model, which is the Dryad, which is a Dreadnought, and I will have that first spec of that done, and I'll be building specs of the other 5s. My Penelope is going from a 12 fret to a 14 fret triple L. So there's some basic changes, but overall quality improvements, and I say that because I'm making a big push into doing a lot more of the work with hand tools. There's just some unescapable facts that seem to be forgotten, such as that a planed surface, a hand-planed surface, glues 40% stronger than one that goes through a sander. And so I'm really, building my hand tool skills and trying to find every application that is practicable to just make a switch over to the hand tools. It's just that the hand tools did not stop evolving when they came out with electricity. We're working with better metals. We've got new innovative ideas. Linear bearings are a thing now where they didn't exist in the past. So even though I'm going backward in time, going with the hand tools, I'm going very strongly forward with the technology of the material. So I'm in that unique position of moving both forward and backward at the same time.
And something you said earlier was that there's people that are just as passionate about making hand tools and getting them to the right builders.
Exactly. Well, that is another thing, is the sourcing of my materials I'm changing. I've pretty much set a standard now where I want to deal locally, or I want to deal with smaller operations, people where I could talk to the actual people that are making the tools or cutting the wood or making the tuners. I've gone over to the Scheller tuners out in Germany. It's a smaller operation, but they know who I am. I like buying from people who know who I am. They come up with their own ideas. They're excited and inspired and intelligent about what they're doing, and that rubs off on me, just like I hope my inspiration in working with guitars helps the artist who's going to be playing them. It's I want this biome of creativity, and that's where I want to be, and that's where I'm going. So,
yeah, you want to work with people that are aware of what you're doing, that offer you something quite literally, like that floatwood Sitka you mentioned, right? What was the deal with that?
Exactly. Again? Well, yeah, I've had been using these driftwood or floatwood Sitka tops, and they were stained by the blue from these iron cleats that held these rafts for lumbermen. Yeah. And so there was one log that opened up and it has red in it also. And he said, "Oh, you were," and I got a call from Alaska saying, those 3 red, white, and blue guitars you've been making, I just opened up a log that you're going to want to see. And, I like those phone calls.
If they didn't think of you.
So that's it's my environment is better that way. I make a better product. Yeah. I have more to offer, and I feel I have more support, and I feel I can be more support when that works. And so that's the direction I'm moving.
Absolutely. And, it's good to cultivate the good energy with the materials that are in your hands all day, whether it's these chisels or whether it's I would imagine as a luthier, I mean, for me, when I write songs, I want to feel like the guitar in my lap is not fighting me. It's giving me, everything that went into this guitar was something that I talked to with an expert about, and we came up with something that's going to enhance these songs. And then you sit there for a half hour and you realize the composition of this tune might not have been reached because I might not have enjoyed the guitar as much or sat comfortably with it or felt like it was leading me in the right direction. And so that cultivation, like tools for you, guitars for me, it's like you come up with something better when you feel like there's a really good history behind it. It's really awesome. But I think that about wraps it up. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege to get to see this shop and see where your head is, where your mind is, tap on these amazing woods and pick them out, and it's just been really wonderful. It's a real privilege, and you and your wife Karen are just such hospitable people, so really appreciate it.
It's great to pick through woods with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a first for me to get to just select everything individually. So Dustin Furlow, Mark Hatcher, I hope you enjoyed the sound clips and the little photos throughout. I try to sprinkle as many in as I can to give you an idea of the layout beyond this beautiful wall of hand tools. So we'll catch you next time, and there's a comment section down below if you guys have any questions or any comments. Welcome to start a conversation. It's always fun after the fact. So again, I hope you enjoyed the sound clips and the conversation. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dustin. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.
you.